It has been 7 months since this genocide campaign began. It's also been around, actually, I think it's been 6 months since I made my initial video on the Israeli apartheid, comparing it to the South African apartheid as well as the US civil rights era apartheid. I've also, throughout these 7 months, covered Palestine briefly in past videos, mainly in one piece, because there's just so much symbolism and so much of the politics within One Piece is about occupation and oppression. I think that must be a focus of Oda. He must really care about that, which is cool. Obviously, with Arlong Park being apartheid, it's pretty obvious. Racism with the fishermen, Alabasta, and resource deprivation, which is definitely happening in Gaza, has been happening even before October 7th, limiting of electricity, food, water, all of that. And then Skypiea for even more obvious reasons of it just literally being an arc about settler colonialism. I also in January made a video about will the war on Gaza end in 2024. In that video I covered like just a bunch of other things that happened in 2023, I believe, and I think Palestine was at the end, was my end segment and was the longest. So I have been talking about it, but I haven't had a sit down direct video just about Palestine, not through the lens of One Piece or just like a brief segment. So I really just want to check in and talk about what's been happening recently. Mainly, I want to focus on college protests, but maybe even just doling out talking points about other things. Israel just invaded Rafah, but mainly we're going to be talking about college protests. But before we get into it, subscribe. I have TikTok, Instagram, Patreon, where I have my scripts, outlines, exclusive, only members can see. I also made my other tiers cheaper. So on top of the $5 one with the scripts and outlines that's really popular, there's also the $7 one where you can see my exclusive drawings, exclusive art, if you're into that type of thing, and also the $10 one where you can see exclusive video drafts when I do video essays, which I'm about to make one right now, and also exclusive art process videos. All of the information is on Patreon. Look into it, do it. Yeah. I've learned so much about the history of this situation in these 7 months. In my initial video, I did try and get a brief understanding as someone who, I knew Palestine existed before October 7th, but I wasn't well versed. Like literally in America, I feel like a lot of Americans before October 7th didn't even know Palestine existed in the first place. There was some catching up to do. As I stated, I believe also in the Will the War on Gaza End video, I think I said I don't think I got everything in that video right, but actually I rewatched it not that long ago and I thought I did so. I thought it was just like, it was so bad, but then I rewatched and I was like, oh, this is actually pretty decent. I think it got the message across that obviously apartheid is bad, genocide bad. It's just frustrating for us to continue to do this, but also not surprising because America is the #1 facilitator of violence across the globe. We are the hegemonic superpower and we constantly do this, so it's nothing new. But is it sad? Yes. And honestly, at this point, I feel like if you 7 months into this genocide are not pro-Palestinian and you're still neutral or still on the fence, like if you don't care, I don't know what to tell you. Like honestly, I don't know what to tell you, but hopefully through talking about the college protests, maybe I can get some people who are on the fence to come off of it. But yeah, especially with the recent CNN reports that literally showed Palestinian prisoners in literal concentration camps. Like, if you don't think this is a genocide by now, you aren't paying attention to the basic facts. You don't even have to go in as deep as I do and like watch coverage about this every single day because I'm brain broken. You don't even have to do that. Just understand the basic research, do your due diligence, understand the basics of the situation, and you should come to the conclusion that this is a genocide, that this is bad and shouldn't be happening. We'll get into it. Okay. So what is happening with the college protest? At this point, as the school year is like rounding out, I'm pretty sure there are certain colleges that are part of the protest that have closed out their school year. So as the school year is starting to come to a close across the country, the height of the student movement is pretty much, I don't want to say it's died down, because some students are still protesting at graduation, or even just still on the ground protesting. So I don't want to say it's died out, but it is not at its height anymore. And especially with the police presence that has shut down a lot of the encampments across the country, just been halted a little bit because some of those major encampments that we'll talk about got shut down. So it's kind of the perfect time to talk about it instead of making it like right in the middle of it happening and there's just like constantly new stuff happening. It's kind of perfect to talk about it now as the school year is rounding out. I myself was also a part of a student protest for Palestine. My school had our own solidarity protest walkout for Gaza. It was my first protest ever, which I was really excited about because I've always, since like even the BLM movement, wanted to be a part of a protest. I was just really scared of dying, but like everything went fine, and I'll talk about my experience with that later. But everything was fine and I didn't die, so that's great. We did get middle fingers, but like it was pretty chill, you know what I'm saying? So I'll talk about my personal experience on top of the information from other encampments and protests across the country. So this necessarily didn't really start the student movement, but it was at the beginning of the student movement. Asna Tabassum is the UC valedictorian for the year and was not allowed to speak over what the university called safety concerns. And she believes is over her pro-Palestinian views. And I think that was only really confirmed whenever they shut down the commencement ceremony for graduation in retaliation to these students continuing to protest afterwards. So I think she was probably right. She is a Muslim student studying biomedical engineering with a minor in resistance to genocide studies, which I think we all collectively didn't know existed, but it's cool. It's cool to have a valedictorian who is very outspoken about these things. So like I said, might not have necessarily been the catalyst, but was at the beginning of when this movement started. So I want to cover 3 main colleges that were at the forefront of the media coverage of this movement. I believe Vanderbilt was the first to build an encampment, and then Columbia soon followed after. But today we're going to be covering Columbia, UCLA, and Emory. Over the entire country, there have been 2,700 students who have been arrested, which is an insane number. But we have actually seen some good things come from this, and it hasn't just been like completely hitting a wall. Brown, Rutgers, and a few other universities actually met these students' demands and either are planning or already divested from Israel, which is super sick. And a lot of universities historically have divested from South Africa, Russia, fossil fuels. So whether it's for aesthetic purposes or because student protesters have historically demanded for their university to divest so that their tuition dollars do not go towards genocide or apartheid or whatever it may be, this movement has historical ground. It is not, whatever people say, it is not far-fetched to have these demands, because we have seen it historically actually work, specifically with the South African apartheid especially. And even Nelson Mandela cites that the divestment campaigns might have been the reason for why the South African apartheid fell. So it's not in vain. It is not insignificant at all. No matter what the media tells you, no matter, how they try to convince you in their effort to keep Israel looking good and to discourage this movement. It's just not true at all. And also now there are officially encampments on all 7 continents, which is insane. In my last video about Shogun, I talked about the Japanese pro-Palestinian protest, and they are doing I don't know if they're doing encampments there, but they are doing student protests there. They're also doing student encampments in Europe and in South America and just everywhere. And there are encampments, supposedly, this is according to a Twitter thread, so I don't know how credible this is, I'll double check it, but supposedly there are encampments on all 7 continents, which is insane. So the student movement is growing globally, causing support for Israel to plummet even further. It's putting Israel's actions at the forefront and is really showing that we may be nearing the end of this, which could mean we have like several years to go. But it's not looking good for Israel, which is amazing. It's great to see so much solidarity around the world, and to see it just kind of gives you a visual of how many people are pro-Palestinian. But let's start with Emory. I mentioned this one not only because a fellow Hasnabi head Lesbi Rights was one of the main organizers, but also it's an example of police violence. About 2 weeks ago, students attempted to set up an encampment in solidarity with Gaza, and their protest was shut down by the university whenever they called the APD on them. And if you don't know, the APD is a famously vicious police force that, similar to the NYPD, is trained by the IDF. In fact, at our student protests, we have a chant that says APD, KKK, IDF, they're all the same. APD, KKK, IDF, they're all the same. That's my favorite chant. Okay, I don't know if you can tell. And these students were tear gassed. I believe a black street medic was continuously tased, which can kill you. They fired rubber bullets, which can also kill you, despite it being called less than lethal, and ultimately arrested around 28 people. 2 professors were of those 28 that were arrested, one of whom was questioning the police as to why they were arresting students, then got slammed on the ground, which doesn't help with optics for the police and for the university, which called the police. People in the public do not take lightly to white women, especially older white women, getting brutalized. You know, that's not gonna look good in the media at all. And that was just that day alone. I believe the students at Emory continued to protest and attempted to set up an encampment. I don't think that they ever successfully did, to my knowledge. Similarly to UT Austin, which also wasn't able to set up an encampment because the police, they just got constantly shut down by the police, by the university, which is a shame. Students are also at Emory voting in favor of a no confidence vote against the university's president. And I believe they have like thousands of signatures that are saying that they oppose the university's president, which is great. And ultimately, the brutalization from the police is not good, obviously, but it does reaffirm, hopefully, to the world what the side the police are on, what they are there to do. And it's not to protect the students, it's to fight against them, to fight against any opposition. It's there to do the state's violence, to do in the case of the university, the elite's violence. You know, a university, which I learned recently through the college protest, kind of works like a hedge fund. It just really affirms that universities are also playing into this cycle of capitalism and putting their loyalty into capital gains rather than into, you know, like education and the things they're there to do, you know. On that note of what the police are there to do, let's talk about UCLA. They actually successfully built an encampment, and it was up for weeks, and it was all pretty much peaceful. They did have counter protesters there like pretty much every day who weren't from the university at all, but it is a public university, so anybody is allowed to come, which has good and bad to it. In this case, an insane thing happened where the counter protesters raised enough money through a GoFundMe to set up a like jumbotron that just played October 7th videos constantly on loop. which is insane. And the university did not have any smoke for that. Did have smoke for students peacefully protesting, which is, once again, shows where this university lies. You know, some universities, they have two options. They can, you know, shut down the encampment by meeting the students' demands and being peaceful, or they can bring violence to their campus. And UCLA really, you know, showed the latter for sure. So on April 30th, Zionists who were already parading around bananas despite a student being allergic, you know, nothing shows that you're on the right side of history like trying to kill and stalk students. But on the night of the 30th, things got extremely violent. This is a quote from a student. "I'd seen something like I've never seen before, and something that I never would expect to happen. Not in the United States, not in California, and certainly not in Los Angeles and on campus," said Ismail, an alumni who was in the Palestine Solidarity encampment at UCLA on April 30th. "I saw people bleeding from their heads. I saw people on the floor. I saw people crying. And for hours, the encampment was under attack from rabid Zionists who threw fireworks at the students, sprayed aerosol, hit people with metal poles and wooden planks, tried desperately to break down the encampment and the barricades. And the students had to fend for themselves and protect the encampment for hours. And they desperately tried to call in law enforcement to help them. And it took forever for the police to get there. And whenever they did get there, they stood in a line and watched for another hour as the Zionists continued to attack them before they then dispersed the crowd, which is insane and once again shows which side the police are on. They're not there to protect the students who are obviously protesting genocide. Israel, which is obviously America's watchdog in the Middle East, their client state, it just goes against the interest that the police are there to protect, obviously, and have historically protected. And then in the most insane, evil call from the university ever, I thought this was so messed up, and I watched it happen live. It was just so messed up. The next day, after a press conference, they sat down with the vice chancellor, who essentially said, "Our hands are tied. We can't do anything unless you meet our demands, unless you listen to us. We aren't going to listen to you. We're not even going to sit down and have further negotiations with you. This is your last chance." And then, like I said, the most evil move ever. They called in the police to disperse the encampment just a night after they were attacked by Zionists. They then had to fend against the police and once again be brutalized. It's just like, that's evil. That's freaking evil. They didn't even give it a few days. Some of these people had to get staples in their head. They were bleeding from their head. They were hospitalized. And now they have to fend for themselves again, go through it all over again. It's insane, bro. And the police were firing rubber bullets. It was not like, of course, it was not a peaceful dispersal of the encampment, because obviously the UCLA protesters aren't just gonna let them take down their encampment. They're there to defend it. They're there to be in solidarity with Gaza. And obviously the chancellor and the vice chancellor cited the last attack from the Zionists as being like, "Oh, you're bringing violence to the university. We can't have that." So what do? We bring even more violence to the university with the police. It almost gave them a reason to take it down, because obviously there's students in the encampment, so it's not like you're defending the students by calling in the police to brutally arrest them and fire rubber bullets at them. That's obviously not your interest. It was just incredibly messed up, especially to watch it happen, which is so insane. But the UCLA students, like I said, were so valiant in their efforts. They withstood terrible media coverage, rabid counter-protesters. They were so well organized and so well spoken. Like, they should be so incredibly proud of themselves, especially just coming together so quickly to do this. They should be so proud of themselves. Finally, we have Columbia, which received definitely, I feel like, the most media coverage, right next to UCLA. There were 100 faculty that joined these students in solidarity on the first day of Passover. In Colombia, protesters also withstood insane amounts of violence. There were reports of slurs thrown at both Muslim and Jewish anti-Zionists. There were reports of students being sprayed with noxious gas, and also whenever they were jailed, suffering seizures and asthma attacks. So the initial dispersal of the Colombia encampment, police arrested more than 100 students, charged them with trespassing. They also suspended dozens of students, one of whom was Ilhan Omar's daughter. And when students were suspended, they had their belongings thrown out with no notice. I can't speak English. After a few weeks of the encampment being up and trying to negotiate with the university, eventually the university said, we are not going to meet your demands. And so they took over Hamilton Hall, turned it into Hind Hall, which has historically been a place where student protesters have occupied during the South African apartheid, and I believe also during Vietnam, and I believe also during like the 90s or early 2000s. I think there was also an incident where they occupied Hamilton Hall. And that night that they took over the building, police were called in by the university to forcibly remove them. 282 people were arrested that day alone, bringing the total number of students arrested up to like 400 at Columbia alone. I mean, there might have been like repeat arrests, I don't know, but pretty crazy still. And also the police did the strangest, I don't know if it's strange, but it's really sus. They cleared out the reporters and everyone from the area so that no one would see their brutality. And once again, I'm not trying to compare this to One Piece, but right now I'm watching the Marineford, and they literally did the same thing, okay? I'm trying not to put it in the lens of One Piece. We gotta save it for the video. But literally in Marineford, the one world government, the Marines, did the exact same thing. They shut down the cameras in Sabati Archipelago. Okay, literally the same thing, girl. Also, even within the cameras being shut off, the reporters being pushed out of the area near Hamilton Hall. We live in 2024, so everyone has a phone. So obviously not as much coverage as there would have been, but there's still video. And from that video, we know that a student was pushed down the stairs by the police, only to deny that student medical attention for over an hour. Insane. Also, police accidentally fired a gun. Nobody was hurt, but they're just dumbasses, okay? I just need to put that in there so you just classic dumbassery from the police. And it really shows, this situation with Colombia really shows that violence is only justifiable in the hands of the police. The university and the media were mad at the student protesters. Obviously, when they occupied Hamilton Hall, they had to break in, and so they were mad that they broke glass and doors and stuff. But the police, in order to forcibly remove students, had to do even way more vandalism. It's really weird that the university and the media were mad about that, but when the police do it, of course it's okay. And the police showed way more disproportionate violence than the students could ever. All of these protests across the country were pretty peaceful. The police obviously do infinitely more violence. Like I said with UCLA, firing rubber bullets, it's just not necessary at all and does not meet the moment, because obviously the students don't have that same firepower, so why are you shooting them with less than lethal? Something that can, despite the name, like I said, kill people. You know, it's just unnecessary violence. Nothing new though. We are repeating history. Like I said in my Shogun video, nobody repeats history. No one perpetuates their mistakes like we do. I guess it's because we don't. The State Department anyways does not really view them as mistakes. They are calculated, intentional moves. It is a clear political stance, so I'm not sure. Maybe that's why we keep doing it, because they don't care, obviously. But my personal experience, like I said, was pretty great. Beautiful moment of solidarity. It was really great because I feel like I suffer from social anxiety, and it was just so great because I read a poem, but I didn't feel like anyone in that space would judge me. Like, I knew we were all there to support each other and fight in solidarity. We were all united under one cause, and so I didn't have to worry about, you know, feeling like I was out of place. Like, I was exactly where I was meant to be. Our college did a lot of scare tactics in the build up to the protest, mainly because our SJP chapter, we didn't have any sort of like socialist organization compared to like an Emory or other colleges that already have like socialist organizations or SJP chapters or Jewish Force for Peace chapters like already established. Like Emory can post about a protest happening the day before, maybe even like a few hours before, because they already have a set amount of people who are dedicated to being there, and so they're just gonna let fringe people know that aren't a part of the organization to show up. But because we didn't have that, the university was able to do way more preparation prior to the protest, but they didn't shut it down or anything, which is good. But they did build a fence around where we were supposed to originally protest, and also called in the APD. I feel like most people in America fear the police. Police are a lot of times, of course, used to scare people, because especially the APD, like, you don't know what the frick they're gonna do, because at Emory, which is like 10-15 minutes away from our college, they were tear gassing them, you know, like, we don't know what the frick they're gonna do. So I think that discouraged some people from coming who were like scared of like getting suspended, but nothing happened. It was chill. Some people said that like the security were making fun of us, but like, I'm not even gonna attack the fact that literally they sit there and do nothing for hours. I won't even attack that. Okay, I'm like, I won't even come for their job. But a lot of the security at our school are black, so they should, on that basis, be ashamed of themselves. It's not identical to what happened to black people, but it is an emancipation movement, just like with slavery, just like with the civil rights movement. There's so much that you can compare, even the way that animosity from Palestinians towards Israelis is kind of similar to animosity from black people towards white people. You know, we are both groups of people who have been oppressed. You should just be ashamed of yourself on that level as a black person, that you do not care and that you think this movement is silly. You should be ashamed as a black person. Okay, I speak my personal experience to say, if you have the chance to join a protest, do it. Now, the media coverage has been gross on both the liberal and conservative side. CNN and Fox News alike, while they may posture as if they are on two different sides, they literally have the same exact position, as I've said before, on foreign policy. So I don't know why they act like they're against each other, because they're not. But the main thing has been calling these protests anti-Semitic, and obviously that's not true. One of the main organizers, as I mentioned, is Jewish Voice for Peace. They have chapters on all of these colleges and universities that help put together these protests and encampments. And so within that, there are plenty of anti-Zionist Jewish people part of this movement because of that, and also just because they are against Israel, naturally. We even at our protest had a Jewish kid who was rocking his yarmulke while he held up a sign that said "never again" means never again. Like, many of the anti-Jewish protesters and students have said that they feel alienated from their own community for not supporting Israel. Like, this doesn't help them in that way. Like, they're kind of sacrificing their social life and their ties to their community for being pro-Palestinian and against Israel. They've been called self-hating Jews, bad Jews, all for opposing genocide. It's insane. And also, as I said, Colombia, they were celebrating Passover, they had Shabbat. Everyone is welcome in this movement. This isn't a movement against Judaism. It is a movement against Zionism, a supremacist, genocidal ideology. Despite what the ADL, Jonathan Greenblatt, all of them want to, dole out and believe, Israel doesn't represent all Jewish people. That in itself is anti-Semitic, to view the Jewish community as a monolith. They are human beings who have differing opinions, obviously. Despite what the media wants to tell you and what Israel wants to tell you, They do not protect Jewish people. That is not their interest. Their interest is obviously, especially with the invasion of Rafah and denying the end of a ceasefire, they are not looking to get the hostages out. And in fact, they've probably killed the majority of hostages from their bombing campaign. They are not there to protect Jewish people at all. They do not want an end to this war. They do not want peace for Israeli people. They do not want peace for anyone, which they have shown time and time again, especially with Rafah, especially with their bombing campaigns. They've made their intentions clear. So that has been the main misinformation within the student movement, but that is just categorically false. So if you are Jewish and you want to join the protest, but you're scared of people thinking you're Zionist, I'm here to tell you that no one will do that. And if they do, they are not loyal to this cause. They're anti-Semitic and they suck, but nobody will do that. So a lot of what the news was holding up during this period was bringing on Zionist students to tell, especially on Fox News, they brought on Zionist students to say how terrified they were to be on campus. I counter that with, I wonder how afraid, how terrified the kids in Gaza that we are fighting for are. But your fifis being hurt matter more than kids losing their family members, starving. You will never know what it feels to be terrified. Believe me, you will never know. There was also reports of Israeli flags being called a Nazi flag and it being snatched from people's hands. There was this video going around where this girl got stabbed, I say, in the eye with a Palestinian flag, but she didn't get stabbed at all. But the media focused on that. They focus on these fringe edge cases to center the conversation around, to move it away from what these students are fighting for and on to what they're doing wrong, how anti-Semitic they are. Disgusting coverage, unsurprising. And you have even Joe Biden saying, even in recent days, we've seen harassment and calls for violence against Jews. This blatant anti-Semitism is reprehensible and dangerous and has absolutely no place on college campuses or anywhere in our country. And once again, I counter that with, he has the audacity to criticize students for justifiably protesting as he sits silent as Israel invades Rafah. He has the audacity whenever he said this would cross his red line, the invasion of Rafah, but yet his red line has moved again and again. And of course, the Columbia students in particular sent a message saying, we firmly reject any form of hate or bigotry and stand vigilant against non-students attempting to disrupt the solidarity being forged among students, Palestinian, Muslim, Arab, Jewish, Black, and pro-Palestinian classmates and colleagues. They said in a statement, "It is very clear to us that people on the outside do not understand what this encampment is about," said Leah Salim, a Barnard sophomore who said she was one of the 15 Jewish students arrested on Columbia lawn last week. Salim said it was not anti-Semitic to criticize the state of Israel. And all of this comes on the heels of Congress ruling that from the river to the sea is anti-Semitic, which is so dumb. And that, along with the whole TikTok ban, you have better things to be doing than to be voting on this inconsequential, stupid stuff. Give me healthcare, give me free healthcare, pay for my college. Okay, please, do something useful, please. And all of this just shows that any opposition to Israel is going to be weaponized as anti-Semitic, and no one is willing to listen to what the protesters are saying. Like I said, we are repeating history. We've been through these arguments before during Vietnam, with the genocide of Native Americans, and even after the Holocaust. It's crazy that we have to continue to convince people that genocide is bad, that murdering is bad. Sometimes it is helpful to look back at history. For example, during the Holocaust, I believe in America, nobody cared about what was happening there. It was not at the top of mind for Americans, despite it obviously being a genocide. Even if we go back to the civil rights movement, figures that we love now, like MLK, were looked down upon, even though they were championing a movement of equal rights, equal representation, something that we, at least aesthetically, like to say we believe in now that it's been, 50, 60 years later. And even after the death of the 4 students at Kent State, they were labeled as bums and radicals by the president, by Nixon. So we are sadly repeating history, but hopefully that tells us that the end is near. Like I said, there are student encampments and protests just in general all around the globe. It is becoming increasingly unfavorable to favor Israel. And even the UN has voted to, bring Palestine in and give them membership. Like, we are moving somewhere. It may not always feel like we are, but we are. It is important to keep your head up. And it was great to see the videos from the children in Gaza who see what we're doing and are proud of us. It really brought tears to my eyes because it just reminds you what you're fighting for. And so as long as they are happy with what we're doing, that's all the frick that matters. Okay, frick CNN, frick Fox News, frick Joe Biden, frick all of you. Okay, we must not lose sight of the goal no matter what. After all, it was just 3 years after Kent State that the Vietnam War ended. At least that America moved out of Vietnam. And we will be the group in 10, 20, 50 years. Once this is all said and done, we will be the ones who were on the right side of history. The Zionists, the media. Joe Biden won't be alive, so I can't even say him, but they will have to reckon with themselves. They will be the ones who are struggling to sleep at night because of the violence they perpetuated. And I sleep well at night knowing that. So thank you so much for watching. I would like to thank my Patreon members and my YouTube members alike for supporting the work we do. And I will see you in the next one. Okay, bye. For Palestine. Free Palestine. Free Palestine.